Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. One of the best parts about being a plant medicine proponent in the present day is that, unlike in years past, where there was little research being done on these compounds and most people were quote-unquote just saying no, there is substantial research in the present day, coupled with the beginning of changes in legislature that, similar to cannabis, will be able to assist these compounds in continuing to be researched and destigmatized. This being said, one of my absolute favorite aspects of this change is having the opportunity to speak with doctors who are trained in the Western medicine system, yet have interacted with psychedelics and are as open-minded as can be when looking at the entire scope of health as a whole. Today's guest on the show is one of my dear friends and favorite people to dive in deep with on topics ranging from plant medicines to health, the nature of reality, and more. He is the owner of Beloved Holistics, at which he practices a holistic approach in the OBGYN field, allowing each of his clients to be empowered with the ability of shared decision-making in the treatment of their medical conditions and management of childbirth, is the host of the Holistic OBGYN podcast, which I highly recommend and was a recent guest on, and is also a CHEK trained professional, adding to his repertoire of the holistic approach to health that sets him apart from the typical Western medicine doctors that focus merely on attacking the symptoms rather than discovering the root cause of those symptoms. So, with all of that groundwork being laid, please help me in welcoming my man, Dr. Nathan Riley, to the show. Nathan, what's up, my man? Great to have you here.
Man. It's good to be back. I appreciate it. It's good to see your shiny face. We're both home again after all those weeks of traveling.
We were just talking before we hit record. I'm like, if I never travel again, it will be too soon. You know, like I'm so over it.
Never again is too soon. Yeah, it's hard to travel, and we've got 2 little girls now too, and it's exhausting. But you know, here we are. We're doing life. So
yes. And you know, like I talk about this often, and I think I might have talked about it with you before, but it's so awkward to go through an airport, right? Like, let's just talk about the one aspect of travel that is the airport, right? Which is like the exact polar opposite of everything that we are in our lives, right? It's like the stress, right? Like the security checks, like the EMFs, right? Like the go, like it's everything that I am not. And so like when I go there, it's just like an absolute yikes for me.
It's a total yikes. That's exactly right. It's exhausting just being in airports. Like, get me out of here. Get me out of this concrete mess of EMF and linoleum and dirty bad food. And Panda Express is open at like 7:30 in the morning. It's like, who the hell is eating orange chicken at 7:30 in the morning? There's like 800 people lined up, waiting to raise their gate. It's like, God, this is just the epitome of like poor health, everything about,
Yeah. And it's like, being an empath too, like you can feel the energetic signature of those people and also the whole entire aspect of the airport as a whole. And so like, for me, it's so draining going through that process because, not to mention the fact that when you're on the airplane, you're breathing in recycled air and the turbulence of like, is this plane going to fall out of the fucking sky? It's like, we talk about psychedelics. I'm like, psychedelics are easy to me compared to going through an airport. You know what I mean? Like, at least I know I'm going to be okay in the end with psychedelics, With an airport, there's so much out of your control that you don't know, and it's just, it's really funny.
We're hurtling through space in a 2,000-ton machine that is being commandeered by 2 young men who are underpaid and being told what to do by every government agency in the world. Like, it's just a recipe for disaster, but it's how we still get around. And
yes,
I think RV life is the way to go.
Yes. I talk about it all the time. I say the only reason I want money in my life is just to never have to fly domestic again. Like that straight up, like just to be able to go to a tarmac and just walk onto a private jet and just do that. Like that's the only reason, like legitimately that and a lake house, like,
yeah, exactly.
That's the one hack I haven't been able to find my way around. As the loophole guy, I have not been able to find a way to get out of domestic flights yet.
So there's no way around it. There's no way around it. Yeah, got places for people to see.
Yes. And so, man, I'm so excited to have you here to talk about, one of our mutual favorite subjects, which is psychedelics and all of the interesting stuff that goes along with them, consciousness, soul development, all of that stuff. And we'll see where the divine takes us in this conversation. But, I'd love to start with, how you as a Western medicine doctor, right, that went through the Western medicine doctrine system, got into psychedelics, was first aware of them. Did that happen before you became a doctor? Did that happen during that? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, there's one important thing that you left out in the bio, which is that I'm a residency trained as an OBGYN, which means I take care of women. I train to attend births. I train to do C-sections and all this pelvic surgery, right? And that's a pretty regimented scientific program. And then I went on to fellowship in end-of-life care, which is hospice and palliative medicine. Palliative medicine is really this added level of support to people who have chronic conditions that are limiting their life. So when I was in fellowship, I was in San Diego, and I had my first experience with psilocybin. I was at Burning Man, and it was, as everybody says, it's like it kind of opens you up a little bit. And, a little bit more sensitive myself to subtle energies. And I did this recent solo cast on my podcast, which talks about kind of my upbringing and how I gradually grew a distrust of the medical system and the system that gave birth to me, right? You work your ass off your whole life in order to be told, here's the answer to the test. Like, I have the answers to the test, but what does that actually do to help people, right? And the more you sit with birth, the more you sit with death, you realize there's something more going on here. And, even something as simple as like, I remember cutting a tree once when I was a kid, and I was cutting the limb off because the limb had split. It was like this big sycamore tree, and I was cutting it off with a chainsaw, and I heard like a moaning. And I was like, what the hell is that sound? It's like the tree creaking. Like, am I going to get hit with a branch or whatever? And I realized it was like the tree was actually like emoting. And for anybody out there who doesn't believe me, I don't care if you don't believe me. I was there, and it happened.
It was real.
It was real. And that was way before cannabis and MDMA and psilocybin and LSD and all these other things I've experimented with. But, early on, for some of us, we realized like, wow, there's something magical out there. And that magic is kind of squashed out of you the further you get into the medical sciences, because we like to reduce everything to just the measurable. Well, how do you measure the experience of love or consciousness? And you and I have talked about this before. So, fast forward then to fellowship, I did mushrooms for the first time with my wife in a yurt. And I remember for the first time feeling like everything is love and everything is okay. Everything's going to be okay. So, in an airport, nothing seems okay. Everyday life, nothing seems okay. You're told you're not working hard enough. You're not producing enough. You're not making enough money. You don't have enough stuff, enough bigger houses or whatever. And in this case, it was like, whoa, everything's okay. Like, I am loved. I am love. Everything is love. And, it sounds hippy dippy, but there's something really important to that, because if everything is love, if there's more out there than what I was just taught to measure and then act on, right, which is blood loss or infection or whatever, there's person's not breathing enough, let's put them on machines. Like, these measurable things are important, but what about the immeasurable, the non-quantifiable things? And when you're in that state of awareness of the more subtle things, you start to just get a download from the universe that like, hey, buddy, we got you. You're okay. You're not actually an enemy to the cosmos. You're not an enemy to Mother Earth. Like, nature's not out to get you. And so then you take that into your experience with birth and death, and you're like, whoa, this is not just a medical procedure, attending birth. This is not just a medical procedure to die. It's not a failure of the medical system if you die. In fact, it's a privilege to die. I hope you don't die any sooner than you hope, but you might. And from now until then, it's the only thing you have control over. So it was a really important experience for me to have that. And I had been researching this stuff for years, and I'd gotten really into it. And we even listened to Michael Pollan's book, Driving into Burning Man. We had like a 9-hour wait at the gate that year, and we listened to like almost the whole book. And we also talked about like, what if we go to Orgy Dome? And we were talking about all this other stuff that happens. It's a totally heart-opening experience and like mind-expanding experience. So
what's up, ladies and gents? I wanted to take a second while I had your ear to share with all of you a very important announcement. Now, anyone who's been listening to the show for some time now knows that I am passionate about coaching and helping other coaches up-level their coaching practice. What I have noticed in working with hundreds of coaches is that coaches of all different types are facing challenges with being able to get their clients strong and consistent results, understand where to put their energy to allow their practices to thrive, stand out in the vast sea of coaches, move from imposter syndrome into trusting themselves, and ultimately make the money necessary to be financially independent in their coaching practice. The root of these issues comes down to a lack of connection with your creative force as a coach and entrepreneur. Now, this is why we at Highly Optimized have created the Connect with Cannabis 10-week coaching certification program. The reason that cannabis is the focus of our program is because cannabis acts as an imagination medicine. And in order to break free of these challenges, you must first be able to imagine yourself as the coach that is successful and has been able to break free of these challenges. When you are able to truly imagine and connect with the most powerful version of yourself, you can find the clarity to build your business, your authentic voice to speak directly to your clients, and the faith that you can overcome everything standing in your way. Once you have experienced and learned how to achieve these results for yourself, you will be able to offer this same unique skill set in your coaching practice to support your clients in overcoming their limiting beliefs and allow them to experience the breakthrough results that will make you stand out as a world-class coach. In this program, you will learn the science behind cannabis, how to experience the healing powers of cannabis, and how to facilitate these healing powers with your clients. With personalized one-on-one support on how to apply these frameworks into your business and weekly group calls within a community of coaches just like you will be equipped with a unique skill set that will allow you to get consistent, powerful results with your clients, feel confident in your coaching abilities, and allow you to gain financial independence while having the opportunity to wake up each day excited to share your important work with the world. For anyone listening who is hearing the call to set yourself apart and develop a unique set of coaching skills not found anywhere else in the world, jump over to the link in our Instagram bio and book a complimentary call with me today. Together, we will go over your current challenges in your business, your goals for your business, and decide together whether you qualify for a seat in the program. The next class begins February 9th, and spots are filling up quickly to be a part of the budding movement that is cannabis coaching. So book your call today and position yourself as a leading voice of how to work with this sacred plant medicine in your practice. Thank you all for your continued support, and as always, enjoy the show. Hey everybody, I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
So then while I was in fellowship, I had these experiences. I met a couple important people in the field. I was kind of getting connected in with, the use of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy for end of life, existential pain, specifically at end of life. And really it's that when you're about to die or when you're about to give birth, you're about to go through a portal. And that portal probably looks very similar for the birthing woman, for the baby, for the dying person, etc. And to have an appreciation that okay, all of that stuff I've been feeling my whole life. And now I've been validated through this one experience with psilocybin. And we're not talking psilocybin, we're talking mushrooms. There is an important distinction between synthetic psilocybin and the experience of connecting with something that is an important nervous system for the entire biosphere, right? You become connected instantly with an entire kingdom that has been neglected for so many years, right? Mushrooms on your salad. But what about all these medicinal mushrooms, turkey foot, chaga, cubensis? I mean, there's all these different strains. And so it kind of unlocked my sort of awareness. It was validating, but it was also wow, what is the power of this? What if somebody could feel like this as they're dying? Or what if somebody could feel like this as they're giving birth? And so I started really kind of digging in from there. And I've had many, many experiences since then. But what I think I've come to is that this is a missing link. This is an important therapeutic that we're not engaging with, whether it's at end of life or, in our point B to point D, point birth to point death, B to D. We're not experimenting with these things. And instead, we're actually distracting ourselves with cell phones and computers and EMF and cell phone towers and all this other stuff that we're not even aware of it until we take something, we ingest it, and we have to wait to see what happens. And whether you take 1 gram or 10 grams, something profound possibly could happen. But you have to consider the set and the setting, and you have to respect this. This is not a medicine. And in my opinion, I don't even think cannabis should be regulated. I think that it's a shame that people are put into jail for this. And it's even more of a shame that LSD, lysergic diethylamide.
Diethylamide, yeah.
Yeah. Psilocybin, DMT, mescaline, like all of these plant medicines, and mushrooms are not plants. So I always have to be careful with that. Mm-hmm. Mushrooms and plant medicines. There's an important something here that could be used. But if we regulate it and we start synthesizing it, it becomes the next new bottle on the shelf that we just take as the silver bullet to fix things. Mm-hmm. So what if we instead took a step back and we considered, wow, if giving birth or if dying at some point, which we all have to do, is going to be this profoundly important experience, but we're distracted from the reality of these rites of passage our whole life. What if you could get a glimpse into it with a dose of something like psilocybin, right? And you can encapsulate it, you can take it in tea, you can do all kinds of interesting things with it. And so that kind of set me off on that journey. And once you see it, it's sort of like seeing the man behind the curtain. When you see the Wizard of Oz, now you're not as enthralled with the Wizard of Oz, the illusion of what life is. You actually get to see behind the curtain. You get to see what's really going on. And what's really going on is that love is the creative force of the universe. Yes. And in a world that's increasingly divided and angry and resentful, and you have a God sitting up there in the clouds that's telling you not to play with your ding dong, and now you're worried, if I go through this portal, am I going to end up in some fiery hell? You realize that none of that really matters, because you're not going to end up in a fiery hell unless your hell is being unified with everything around you. And that's powerful medicine, right? It's scary to die, but what if we could give you a dose of medicine, put on some East Forest or something, blindfold you and have somebody hold your hand and just let you go down the staircase, open those doors and see what's behind. There's something importantly human about that, but we don't see it that way. We see that as drugs are bad. We see this as an impossibly challenging thing for government regulatory bodies to oversee. And so we have just said, like, let's squash it all and let's just stick with the physical.
Yeah. I feel like they never finished that statement. Drugs are bad. They forgot to put in the part of drugs are bad for the business of making you stay in a fear state all the time and make you feel like you need the next best car, the next best house, a new thing on a TV ad to feel whole, because you have yet to accept and take in your full power as a divine being in human form. Right. And, they do a lot of those kind of things, like, leave sentences unfinished. Right. And, everything you said, I agree with wholeheartedly. And one of the things that you were talking about was this idea that, we have psilocybin mushrooms, right? But now, instead of, with psilocybin therapy coming online, they're like, well, how do we synthesize it, right? How do we do this, right? And this is like, something I learned within the cannabis realm is that, what they're essentially looking to do is outlaw the natural and then monopolize on the synthetic, right? And it's this unconscious belief, or maybe it's conscious for some scientists, that we know better than nature. But when we look at the world right now, we look at the state of the world, we look at how much we're polluting the earth, we're looking at how much we're killing the oceans and everything. Do we really understand, and are quote unquote smarter than the earth? Or are we just little infants that are unaware of the damage we're causing? Right. And the thing that I really look to with this is, like you were mentioning with death, most humans have no idea what is actually going on. And I don't pretend to understand what is going on, but I know that I don't know what's going on. And that's a very important distinction, right? Because when you understand that you don't know, right, then you're more open-minded to things like, hey, did that tree actually emote when I cut that down? Like, why wouldn't that be true, right? Like, at the end of the day, humans, we like to think that we know everything, right? That's why when you read a history book, it's like, well, who is alive now that was alive in the 1700s? Well, no one, but we know this is what happened, right? And we obviously understand that there's many challenges with that. Like, oh, I guess Christopher Columbus wasn't the guy we thought he was. Like, whoops. I guess lobotomies weren't what we thought they were. Whoops. And so I think it's this naivety of human beings to think that we understand things, when in reality, the whole point of being here is not to understand, it's to experience, right? It's to experience. Like, would you rather know what was in your Christmas presents before you open them, or would you rather be surprised when you open them, right? And for me, I choose the surprise every single time. And I've had very many experiences, especially on psilocybin, where I've had that exact same realization where I'll share a funny memory with you. Like, I remember laying in my bed, and it was with two of my friends, and we had broken through in like a 18-gram mushroom tea, like between the three of us. This is years ago now. And I had a very challenging experience on the come up because my ego was too entrenched in the experience, and it was all good, right? The mushrooms, they gave me a little scare to knock me back to reality and, create some, humbleness in me. And then they were like, all right, now go lay in your bed and have fun. Right. And so I'm laying there, and I break through to that, like, just expanded state where you feel like you're out here, and you're just getting every answer that you could ever, like, for any question you've ever had in your life. And I remember I just kept asking question after question, being like, it can't be love, right? Like, and then it'd be like, no, that's love too. And I'd be like, what about this? It's love. And I just remember laughing hysterically, maniacally laughing, going, it's all love. Oh my God, it's all love. And then I would like sit there for a second, rubbing my beard, and then be like, that's love too. And I was just like completely blown away by that. And that one experience changed my entire life. And, having experimented with medicines such as 5-MeO DMT, I think that's at least for me in my personal experience with psychedelics, that's been the medicine that's gotten me wherever home is. All I know is that's where it is. Like, when I broke through on that medicine, I was like, yeah, this is like the end point. Like, you want to call it dying before you die, whatever. But when you remember that you are an integral piece of everything, and that everything is you, and it's almost like pantheism where everything is God because everything comes from the same source. When you understand that, you're all of a sudden not as worried about getting the next best car. You're not worried about getting the bigger house. You're not worried about keeping up with the Joneses. And that's why I say it's very bad for the business of keeping you in a fear state, because when you realize that you're infinite, right? That you're divine, that death is just another chapter in a sea of infinite possibilities, you're uncontrollable. And that is extremely scary for the powers that be.
Amen. One problem I think that we're seeing. So anything that goes into your body somehow became the purview of doctors. And I don't know how that came to be, because we don't learn anything about diet, any of the CHEK principles: diet, movement, nutrition, hydration,
breathing,
breath, mindset, and sleep. We don't learn anything about that. And so for our medical establishment to say, oh, there's maybe no benefit, there's probably no benefit to this, right? Or only in a controlled clinical setting can we say that there's a benefit. Well, my experiences have been real. And they've made me a better man. They've helped me connect with my kids. They've helped me sort of keep my ego in check. I thought my ego was pulverized when I went through medical school and all the medical training, because they just tell you you're wrong all the time. Like, I don't know shit. That's basically what you're taught. And even when you get out, you're taught you don't know shit. And if you think about the types of people that go into medical school, they're a bunch of nerds. Like, they're not risk takers. They just want to get the right answer on the test. So for something to be presented to them that you don't understand, that we don't have a mechanism for. We don't. Like, anybody out there who thinks we have a mechanism for how psychedelics work, you're missing the point. We don't need to know that it's 5-HT2A receptor, like the serotonin 2A receptor. We don't need to know that that's what's responsible, because, we run into the problem of trying to measure the immeasurable. And the reason that we know that serotonin is not the only thing responsible is that if serotonin was responsible, SSRIs and SNRIs would do wonders for depression. And they don't do shit for depression. They take the edge off maybe for a period of time. Then you develop tachyphylaxis. You need higher doses of that. You've got no highs, no lows. You've got no libido. You're probably developing other issues as a result in your gut, dysregulation and all this other stuff. But hey, at least you're not going to kill yourself. Like, that's the outcome. Like, the outcome is you can't have highs or lows, but at least, hey, this person's laying in bed miserable because they don't have any life anymore, and they're not going to kill themselves. Thank goodness, doctor, you came in and saved the day. But what if I told you that psilocybin also works at those same receptors, but people do, and I should also include MDMA, because MDMA assisted psychotherapy, even though it's not a classical psychedelic, works so much better than antidepressants that it's like, they stopped the trials like a year in, and they're like, fuck it. Like, this is we're seeing a positive response in every single patient versus maybe 2% of patients or 20% of patients in studies on antidepressants. So the reason I bring up the training of medical doctors is we're not taught to be critical thinkers. We're taught to do the thing that somebody else has told us to do. And I couldn't do that, which is why I stepped out of the system entirely and I started Beloved Holistics, because now I actually get to recommend to people, have you considered psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, right? Like, this is not your average doctor you're speaking to, and I don't make any money off of this, but I'm here to help people. I went through all that school and that sacrifice to help people. And I know that you who have been on 3 or 4 antidepressants and who are just like ready to throw in the towel, I know that you would benefit from some MDMA or from some psilocybin, or, let's give you some LSD in a responsible setting, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's just see what happens. But that is such an affront to the medical establishment because, number one, we don't have a mechanism. And number two, it's not something we can control. When you take that dose of that tea that you and your friends split, or, in the case of my recent experience with a ayahuasca experience, which was 20 hours of absolute, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, probably. And you take it and you're like, let's see what happens, and you're in a safe place. You've got your water, you've got your bathroom, you've got your puke bucket, you're surrounded by good people, like there is no control for this. It's not a 3-hour experience. It is a 20-hour experience. And if I were to tell you that it wasn't one of the most important experiences, any of these experiences I've had, I would be lying. In the Hopkins research, Roland Griffiths and his team out there, one of the metrics they looked at was on a scale of if you consider all of your life experiences, how did this one compare with regards to, how did they describe it? They called it a mystical experience, right? And ubiquitously, everybody that was participating in their studies with psilocybin, I think it was psilocybin, wasn't it? Yeah, it was psilocybin, said that this was at the top of their list of mystical experiences. So in a world that obfuscates experience with reality, and what I say when I say experience in this case, I'm not saying the experience of the person having the experience. I'm saying like we like to create little questionnaires to describe how a person's doing, right? It's like the pain scale, like frowny face up to smiley face. Where do you fall? The reality of these experiences is not a measurable thing, and in a world where we say, oh, to hell with spirituality. I mean, like, since when is spirituality not important? It's been important through the entire span of our written history. And now suddenly everybody's afraid of spirituality as if it's like Catholic or bust. Like when I say spirituality, I'm not talking about going to church and praying to a man in the clouds, the same one that's criticizing us for, whatever, that we're going to end up burning in hell. What I'm talking about is you feel that connection that you just described, that oneness, the love. And then when love is the overarching theme of everything that's going on, how could you possibly be depressed? But, so in these studies, they're looking at people with refractory depression. They've gone through 3 or 4, extensive trials on antidepressants, and they're getting nowhere. And then suddenly one experience with psilocybin, or in some of the UCLA research, one of my colleagues, Charles Grove, he works out at UCLA, he focuses on MDMA. One experience, and you're finally feeling better after years of trying these other drugs. Like, why not open our hearts to the possibilities that these medicines can provide? So anyways, I said a lot. I want to hear what you have to say.
That's amazing. I mean, this is what I love about this podcast is we get to have such beautiful dialogues that open up so much for me. And, we get to co-create this experience. And, I remember I forget the exact statistics, but I think I remember, soft talking knowledge. I think I remember that in phase 3 of the MDMA trials, they were curing over 80% of people's PTSD, not treating, curing it. Like, you walk in there with PTSD, you leave not having PTSD. Now, let me ask, the listener, I mean, everyone listening already understands this, but let me ask the universe this, right? How many pharmaceuticals cure things for people? Right. Not treat. Cure, right? How many actually even treat them in a positive way, right? Let's not even talk about curing. How many treat them without having a myriad of side effects that are almost more damaging than the actual issue you went to get pharmaceuticals for? And I think that we're the alchemists of the 16 and 1700s understood, right? I mean, another term for alchemists is the scientists of the 16 and 1700s. They understood that science and spirituality were one and the same, right? There was what you could measure, there was what you couldn't, right? Quantitative and qualitative. Right, and they understood that. But somewhere along the way, religion became a business, right? It's been a business for a long time, but, it was really challenging for that religious system to understand that, wait, you mean that this plant or this, fungus can allow someone to remember that they are God, and then they don't come here and put money in our bucket, like, yeah, we want to do away with that, right? And so when you really look at it that way, it makes a lot more sense, right? It's like it all comes back to money, right? It always does. And, with cannabis, one of the biggest challenges and one of the areas that I help people with is learning how to grow their own, right? Because they call it weed for a reason. It'll pretty much grow anywhere. It'll grow through cement, right? And so it's extremely challenging for the pharmaceutical industries to say, okay, so you mean someone's going to be able to have access to grow this plant that can do everything from treat Crohn's disease to treat anxiety, to treat depression, to kill cancer cells, to do everything, and they can grow it in their backyard and they can make their own medicine for, $5 or $10 per plant. It's like, that's terrifying for them, right? But good riddance, right? Like, this is not how, this is sick care, right? Like pharmaceuticals, I'm not going to say they never have their place because nothing is binary in life, but I will say, and I imagine you can corroborate this, that most of the time they are overprescribed with a doctor that did not do nearly enough research to actually understand their patient's issues, right? They go, okay, you came in and you have depression, boom, what's the list of things? Okay, that's the one I'm getting the biggest kickback on, or let's just say maybe that's the one that I recommend. We don't even use the kickback thing. So that's the one you're getting. But at the end of the day, we are all so different, right? Like, we're the same, but we're also very unique expressions of that same. And so to think that, we can create pharmaceuticals, right, from our human mind that are going to work for almost everyone. I mean, let's face it, psychedelics don't work for everyone, right? And that's something that I talk about a lot in this show, right? But I do believe that when you look at how many people, how many different types of people, age, gender, ethnicity, demographic, are helped by psychedelics, it's easy to see that they're much more effective. They can be much more effective than the typical way that we do pharmaceuticals in especially Western cultures, but really all throughout the world. And I think this is one of the biggest falsehoods and, challenges and really paradoxical areas of quote unquote healthcare these days, is that we understand that there are so many different things that can help with cancer, right? Like, it's ridiculous to think that, let's use, COVID as an example, right? Now, let's imagine that, these vaccines work and everything like that, right? Let's just imagine for a second, right? So you're going to tell me that an issue happened, right? That's really a 99.8 or 99.9% survival rate, right? It's not one of the leading causes of death right now. We're gonna accept that within a couple of years, all this research was all of a sudden able to be had, right? But cancer has been around how long, and yet we're still giving money to find a cure? It's like, this doesn't make any logical sense, right? Like, the same people that are like, look at us, we're super smart, we figure things out quick, are the same people being like, look at us, we still haven't figured out the simplest issue for over 80 years. It's like, yeah, you can't really have both, but yet they're having both, right? And so I think this is one of the biggest challenges that really psychedelics, for me, I think the best thing they can do is open people's minds, right? Like, aside from the aspects of cannabis being able to cure cancer and these kind of things, which do have a lot of actual quantitative research behind them, for anyone listening who's like, what do you mean by that? Look up FICO, full extract cannabis oil, and its impact on cancer cells and inhibiting their growth. But at the same time, to be able to open your mind and, because essentially your beliefs, your inability to imagine yourself as the next version of yourself, or a version of yourself that's healthier, doesn't have depression, doesn't have anxiety, etc., is keeping you stuck in the belief structures, which are then creating your experience of life as the person with anxiety, depression, etc. And so when you can, tap into something like a medicine that we're talking about that allows you to access your imagination, and then allows you to be like, yeah, this is the version, like, I've experienced my life without depression, so I know it's possible. Then you start finding evidence to support that claim instead of the other claim, which is, nope, you're never going to be fixed unless we give you a pill, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that's one of the best and most profound and potent uses of psychedelics in the modern day world, where so many people are in mass hypnosis. Hello, everybody. I hope you are all enjoying the show. I wanted to stop by and fill you in on our brand new, completely free to join Facebook community called the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle. Now, I imagine many of you are aware of the newest creation within Highly Optimized, which is the Connect with Cannabis 10-week coaching certification program. Alex and I have been having so much fun empowering coaches with the skill set of coaching with cannabis and helping them up-level their coaching practice that we wanted to create a place where anyone could join to ask questions, receive free information on how to work with cannabis in the way we teach in the program, and be able to gain clarity around how to get the best results with their clients in order to become financially independent in their coaching practice. To join, hop over to the link in our Instagram bio and send us a request. It is our intention to assist as many coaches, facilitators, and healers as possible in the important work they are doing in the world. And if you are looking to join a community of like-minded individuals just like you, who are passionate about helping their clients achieve the highest quality of life possible, the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle is for you. I am looking forward to speaking with all of you in the group, and as always, enjoy the show.
Yeah. We talk a lot about the medical system and the doctors and everything who are like the arbiters of like this nefarious thing behind the scene. But even if you consider how, like, you drive down any suburban neighborhood and you've got like a flower garden. Somebody has chosen to plant this plant here because it looks nice in front of, with a contrast of this plant behind it, which has a lighter leaf or whatever. And then we're gonna trim the grass to a certain level because and we don't want any of those dandelions or any of that stupid shit weed stuff in there. We just want regular grass, right? Like, we want to create this little lawn and just have it's cultivated in just the way we want. Like, the French garden, which is what I'm describing, is like the epitome of our exertion of mechanisms of control over nature. And every single person out there goes to Costco and buys their shit because it's cheaper or whatever else. But even if you think about, like, so if you go back, it's like you're thinking about how we grow crops, right? Like, we love to control it in monocrops, like just line them up, grow your carrots here, your cabbage is going to be over there, or whatever. And like, like the idea of regenerative agriculture is becoming, cool nowadays. But the consumers, our entire society is addicted to control. Like, we hit our kids, we yell at our kids, we want them to sit and do this thing. We want them to sit in 5x5 rows in school. We want our gardens to look that way. We want our food to be grown in these these unnatural rows and monocultures. And then you go into the doctor's office. Why would it be any different? The doctor's a part of that society. The patient's a part of that society. And all that they want is, what is the thing that I can control? And if I can control that thing, even if it is a symptom, I'm going to give this pill. And if I can control that symptom, then the data suggests that you're going to live 20 years longer, right? Like a statin or something. Over 20 years, you might reduce one heart attack, So my point in bringing all this up is that the issues with like how we use therapeutics in medicine are a reflection of an ill within our society, which is that the more control you have over something, the better outcome you're going to get. Well, like you said, we've tried to control depression or cancer for decades now, hundreds of years, and we still don't really get it. So why are we continuing to do it that way? I mean, and the same goes for our fields. Like, we see that soil is just being it's bereft now of all
obliterated.
It's obliterated. It's just dust in the wind. It's like, it looks like the Wild West across the Midwest of the United States. So, like, is adding more stuff to the soil going to get us better yields? No, of course not. Should we reverse engineer what a lettuce is and now put it out there and call it genetically modified or genetically modified organism that is going to give us better crops? No, of course not. Like, the more control that we try to impose on a system, the worse outcomes we get, which is probably part of the reason prisons don't work. Like, locking a person in a cell is not rehabilitation, period. Now, I don't know what you do with the rapists and the murderers and the mass shooters and all that. I don't know what we do, but we keep trying to apply the same tactics to the same problem and expecting something different. So with the emergence of psychedelic research in the 60s, which was quickly squashed, by the Reagan and Nixon administrations, we're seeing a resurgence of this. And like you said, in the studies that are going on, they're small, they're far and few between, and they're often using synthetics. But they're still getting, with the MDMA especially, they are still getting almost 100% benefit. It may not be a cure, but there's Charlie Grob has told me about, like, and this is in the literature. Everybody can search this. I'm not making stuff up here or blowing smoke up your butt, but it's like that one experience with MDMA could be all that person needed. And even one experience with MDMA has a lasting effect versus having to take an antidepressant every single day. So if we then also look at like the end of life, like we don't have a way of supporting people through miscarriage, through the loss of a parent, or through their own death. Like we're so afraid of the fact that we're mortal because it's something we can't control again, that when you get to that point, you get to the threshold, what do? We have literally nothing to offer except you could get more chemo. That'll help you avoid it maybe. Or we could put you on dialysis because your kidneys are shot, or we could put you on a ventilator because your lungs can't expand, or we could even replace the left part of your heart with an LVAD, which is a pool pump. And you won't feel alive, but hey, at least blood is circulating, And in my experience with psilocybin, even with patients who have taken it, they take this and they're like, oh, I get it now. I see it. And it's funny how, with the COVID stuff that's going on, what have we seen? We've just seen more and more and more control. But more and more control doesn't work anywhere. Like you cannot control somebody like me. The more you try to control me, the more I'm going to thrash about and create something better over here. And the one interesting thing in the COVID conversation is by far majority, the people that fall on the side of the conversation that you and I do, which is like, I'm cool. I don't want that stuff. I'm just going to keep doing my thing here. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not so sure. I trust the CDC and the FDA, whatever. The side of that people fall on our side, the one commonality is that they've all had at least one psychedelic experience, period. And I think you and I have talked about this, but it's a profound observation I've had. I will even ask people like, have you ever done LSD? And they're like, yesterday, the day before, last week, when?
They sound like people I like hanging out with.
Yeah, exactly. It's like my whole group of people now. Because that they have seen that there's something more than themselves. And in going into that experience, there's a lack of control. Can I tell you a little bit about, so we were talking about psilocybin for end of life. There's also some other reasons that I think people should consider using psychedelics. At a very, very low dose, stacked with lion's mane, there's a synergistic nootropic effect, neurogenic effect, which means the reproduction of nervous tissue, the stuff that helps your body work. You stack it with niacin. Niacin has a vasodilating effect, a vasodilatory effect. And this is the Stamets stack. Paul Stamets, he's another friend of mine. He was like, do it this. And then he emailed me later. He was like, no, go 4 days on, 3 days off of 0.1 grams of psilocybin, 500 milligrams of lion's mane, 25 milligrams of niacin. It's the flushing type, not the niacinamide is the non-flushing variety. And in my palliative care practice, I've recommended this to people, and it helps with neuropathy. It helps with depression. It helps with just feeling better. I don't know why I feel better, but I feel okay today. So I started recommending it to women who have things like fibromyalgia or severe PMS and severe chronic pelvic pain. And lo and behold, a small dose a day for 4 days on, 3 days off for 6 weeks, demonstrable difference. Across the board, people feel better. And they just feel better in general. Their relationships are improved. They're having deeper conversations. And that's not to say everybody should do this, but it should at least make people in the medical industry consider like, all that stuff you're doing, the surgery, the birth control pills, all that stuff for women's health, you're not getting anywhere. So why not just open your mind to the possibility that there's something out there that you don't understand? Like seeing the world through the eyes of a child is so critical. And I just, in line with this thought, I just interviewed a guy named Dolph Zantinga. He was just on Paul Chek's podcast too. And he creates this wand. It's a quartz wand that has coherent water inside. Have you heard about this?
Yes, I have. Paul was telling me about it when I was at his house.
Fucking cool. And I'll send you a link. And I have like an affiliate account with him. I've already had like 10 people buy it because I'm like talking this guy up so much. But he's like in his 70s. He's this Dutch guy. And he was like, I was in business for a while. And I started thinking about how can I improve my health? And water seems really important. Why is water so polluted? And like water doesn't seem to, like, it seems like you have to get water filters and stuff. Like, what's going on with water? And he like in a room of people, he said, we asked the question, what is water? And like nobody had an answer for it. Like, yes, it's 2H with 1 O, H2O. Like you got a molecule of water, but like, what is it? And 15 years later, after researching this for years, they found that like water stores information, water transmits information.
Yes.
And that, to me, for people like me and you and your audience, that's probably not a surprise, because people have heard about, Masaru Emoto's work and Luca Montagne. He's the guy that discovered the virus that's attributed to HIV/AIDS, and he went into water research, and the important part of this part of the conversation, though, is that in order to think about water differently, they had to go all the way back to say, what is water? So I would encourage everybody to say, like, what is the human experience? What is psilocybin? What is chronic pelvic pain? Like, what is depression? What is it? Is it just a lack of neurotransmitters, or is it a reflection that we're in a very, very dirty tank, and that just by fixing the sick fish and putting them back in the dirty tank, that the implications of our society, the sick tank, this is terrain theory versus germ theory, that without cleaning the tank, we're not going to get anywhere, right? And in some ways, it's like, what if we could just let the fish know, hey, there's other fresh water out there, and then the fish becomes less depressed
Yes.
and go out and seek, greener pastures. It's a weird metaphor, but it's I think it functions. There are so many uses for this that I've been seeing with my own clients, and I just hope the world can wake up to it a little bit.
Absolutely. I say this often that I think one of the main challenges we're facing is ego, right? And what I mean by that is, science doesn't change when a new discovery is made. Science changes one dead scientist at a time, right? Because whoever the senior little scientist is, who's like, no, psychedelics are, they're terrible. They don't work, right? Some 25-year-old could find the cure to, let's say, cancer, right? With psychedelics. Let's just use an example. And that guy would be like, that better not get out ever, right? Now, the second he dies, that 25-year-old's research, now no one's ego's entrenched in it. They're going to be able to be like, oh, hey, by the way, we figured this thing out a couple of years ago. And I love that you brought up water, because this is something that I've been diving into really deeply lately. And, I've obviously, I've read about Masaru Emoto, I've done a lot of research into water, but one of the most interesting things that I've read about it is, who's that guy's name? He was just on Aubrey Marcus, Mateus De Stefano. Have you heard of him before?
Yeah. I've heard his name. I haven't listened to the episode yet.
Yeah. He hosts a show on Gaia called Initiation. And this guy, I started watching it, and immediately, it's out there, but the first moment he opened his mouth, I was like, I believe this guy. There was just a deep knowing that, almost like a remembering of something in my soul going, yes, pay attention to this. Right. And he was talking about how in the days of Atlantis and Lemuria, right, the Lemurians were the ones responsible for encoding the water, right, with our full potential of DNA. And it goes super deep into it, but it talks about how the pyramids, right? When you see pyramids, and the reason why they're all over the earth, they're not specifically, attributed to one, section of people, right? Not the Egyptians, not the Peruvians, right? They're everywhere, right? They're in Asia. They're all over the place. What they basically was a way for you as a human being, right, with water in your system, to go into the pyramid and meditate, and you could access the higher levels of consciousness, right? You go to consciousness level 6, level 7, right? When you talk about the archangels, the seraphim, right? All of these beings that are more of a mindset being, they're more of an omniscient being. They don't really have physical bodies anymore because they're more of a collective. That's what the pyramids were originally meant for. And that's how the civilizations of the past understood how to do, how to move rocks and how to do all these things that we're still like, how do they do that? When you look at places like Göbekli Tepe, right? And you're like, okay, so this is one of the oldest recorded places on Earth that's still around, right? That's yet to be, swept away by a flood or something. And yet they made such precise lines and geometry in rocks that we can't even imitate today. It begs the question of what are we missing here? And so when I started, getting into Matthias, he talks about all of this stuff. And then I got into the mystery schools very soon after that. And one of their courses they teach is the 12 races of Earth, right? And immediately when I got into it, they immediately like, yeah, Lemurians, right? Atlanteans, right? All of this stuff. And this part I don't know as much on, but they talk about how, most people living on Earth are descendants from Atlantis, right? And so it makes sense that what I know about intuition, what I know about my experience, the one that can't be measured, right, with psychedelics, when something calls me like that, when I get really laser focused, I see that as a huge sign, right? Because again, I'm no different than most people, right? I still get distracted. I'm still, I'm doing a lot of stuff. I get an analysis paralysis, but I'm quicker to notice now when something completely absorbs my attention. And what I notice there is that there's a reason for that. What the reason is, I don't care. right? I'm not worried about figuring it out. The left brain's going to ask me, what is the reason for it? I don't care, right? All that matters is I'm really focused on one specific thing, and it's a calling, right? And that's what you were talking about earlier with psychedelics, right? With regards to the hospital setting. I think I forget if this is before we hit record, but those researchers who were like, yeah, well, we could put someone in the hospital room and give them like a psilocybin, and these people have never done psilocybin, so they have no idea what that's like. They think it's like an Advil, and you're there telling them like, guys, that is like the biggest yikes you could possibly do is put someone on psilocybin in a fucking hospital. Like the only thing that beats that is a jail cell. You know what I mean? So, it's very interesting to think about these things. But, for me, what psychedelics have really opened up for me is that deepness, right? That expansiveness, that ability to be perfectly okay with not knowing why I'm being called to a certain thing, or why I feel like doing Tai Chi today instead of the normal thing I do, like maybe meditation or something like that. I just go with the flow. And I think that if more people could have an experience, whether through psychedelics or through, mystical experience, whatever it is that allows them to, act as a pattern interrupt and get them more into their intuition, that is what the world needs right now. And honestly, I do see psychedelics as the best way to do that, only because we live in a society where it's not really feasible to go be a monk and live in the mountains for 30 years and get there on your own. So a lot of times people need like a quick pattern interrupt to catch their attention and help them realize like, no, there is something. I experienced it, right? Without having to necessarily work 20, 30 years for it like monks do. And so I do feel they are the best chance we have at remembering who we are as divine beings in human form.
Yeah, a couple of things came up there, and this kind of goes into the birth part of my practice. I just interviewed a woman named Edith Ubuntu Chan, who I met through Charles Eisenstein, and she's a Chinese medicine doctor who, in her training as a Chinese medicine doctor, she started doing Qigong. It's like a part of the curriculum, and she went deeper and deeper and deeper with her Qigong to the point where she at one point had this incredibly profound experience where she experienced herself doing Qigong. And for anybody out there who doesn't know what Qigong or Tai Chi is, it's really just moving energy through your body, right? It's a recalibrating of the Ayurvedic system, the tantric system, we call it the chakras, the meridians within the Chinese medicine system. All this stuff is the same. It's just a different sort of, illustration of it, And so while she's doing it, she experiences that she experiences herself exploding into a trillion tiny pieces of light and love. And then the sadness that she experienced, the profound despair that she experienced coming back into her body. But while she was in this experience, it was kind of like a sort of near-death experience is sort of how she described it. She experienced that there is far more to this than just her, and this is not even in psychedelics. Although I would argue that, proper meditative practice is it's better in many ways probably than a psychedelic experience. But anyway, she saw her body, went back into her body, and then for the rest of her life, she's kind of her life sort of changed thereafter. And she got pregnant, had a baby, and the baby came out and told her about the space babies. Like, oh, Mama, I've been waiting to come into your body for years now. Like, I'm glad that the timing was right, and I'm glad that the stars aligned and it worked out. And he says with things like he's like an extraterrestrial exploring Earth. Like, you guys don't know how to make babies. Like, you don't just mash your peepees together. You have to have intention. And then when the intention's right and the cosmic, whatever intimacies are correct, then there's a persuasion, there's an encouragement for these two bodies to get together. And I know this might be confronting for some people because then we have rape and we have unintended pregnancy and all these other things, but there's more at play here than just the physical, again, point B to point D, and you just, life sucks and then you die. Like, there's more stuff going on. And so in my own practice, and I told you a little bit about this before we started recording, but we did a mushroom ceremony in our recent pregnancy, and I got to meet the soul of our baby. Again, I don't care if you don't believe me. I was there. We were in the woods in a treehouse, and my wife was about 7 months pregnant, excuse me. And I was going deep, deep, deep into the experience. And suddenly this figure emerged in my consciousness, I suppose you would say. And I was like, oh, is that the serpent? Like, I always get like a vision of a serpent. I know that's typically like an ayahuasca thing, maybe. I don't really know. But, the jaguars and these key figures. With psilocybin, it's much more grounding. It's much more connected to Mother Earth. But I get a serpent almost every single time, and it's a hooded cobra. So I was like, oh, like, here's my little buddy. He's back. and then I looked a little, then like with time, I realized, oh, are you my child? She said, hi, Dad. And I told her, I said, hi, Evie, how's mom doing? Like, cause I was worried, like we're doing psilocybin in pregnancy. Like, oh no. And she said, oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. But, mom's having a hard time. And I looked at my wife and she was just like, tears were just showering out of her. So I was like, ask her, and I said, honey, we want to give you a name. We want your name to be Everly Rosa. Like, what do you think? And she said, oh, it's pretty cool. Like, I mean, it sounds so silly. And she was just like, yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's a good name. Yeah. And then she kind of whirled off. And then about an hour later, we're still in this, kind of coming out of it a little bit. But then I had this vision of this little figure, my daughter, dancing in the center. And there was these three figures, almost like witches. I don't know how else to describe them, but they were over top, like this animation process was happening. And this little girl was dancing and spinning. It was like a whirling dervish. And she was laughing and giggling. And it was like, what the fuck is this? Like, am I really seeing this? And it wasn't with my eyes. For everybody out there, if this is new to you, like, you're feeling it, you're experiencing it, but you're not seeing it. But I can tell you, I can illustrate it perfectly for you. So the reason I even tell this story is that then I heard Edith's story. And for anybody out there who's thoughtful about pregnancy or has experienced a miscarriage or is experiencing fertility issues, like, there's more at play than just, penis enters vagina, semen and sperm are ejected, and then an egg and sperm meet, and then we have this physiologic process. There's something more magical and spiritual that's happening. And if you're frustrated, you have to take the brakes off, and you have to just kind of sit back and think about it. I don't know how to approach, by the way, the hard conversation on fetal loss or a neonatal loss, like, heaven forbid a baby dies. But there was something has been something in my experiences with psychedelics that has been very, very healing for me around the fear of something not happening right in the way that we expect it to, where you have a baby, the baby grows up, you get old, the baby takes care of you as an adult, and you die in a nursing home. Like, there's more to it than that. There's something more out there. And we need to start to see pregnancy, especially, as less of a physical experience and more of a spiritual unfolding. It's a transformation of spirit where there is a portal, just like an end of life. And if we can embrace that, if we can sit with that in pregnancy, in birth, and in the postpartum period, you start to, it's a psychedelic experience in and of itself. There's something magical that happens. And yes, blood loss is important. And yes, we need to make sure that your nutrition's okay. And yes, if you have some medical issues, we need to make sure that we address those things. But we're sorely lacking those immeasurable things, especially in pregnancy, which I would argue is more of a sacred process, more of a spiritual process than it is a physiologic process. So that's my little story there.
Yeah. And, you brought up something that I love talking about, which is, when psychedelics, are done with the right intention in a right set and setting, right? And I'm not saying that you can't do them, without those things, right? But if you want them to be the most impactful, right, that's why you do it in those kind of things. And you want to have protection because you are opening yourself up, and there are many challenges that can arise from psychedelics. And I've spoken about those at length in this podcast. But one of the things that starts to happen is you start to realize that life itself is a psychedelic, right? And it's funny because you start like integrating, right? This is the whole idea of integration, the experiences you feel in psychedelics, right? The waves of energy, the tremors in your body, right? Like the visions, right? All of these things. Then that's like a roadmap of saying, this is what's possible. Now go find out why in your life this isn't happening. Because kids, they have imaginary friends. They're in imagination land, right? They're in imagination and action. They're able to be completely okay playing in dirt, getting dirty, not caring if they're dirty, right? None of those things exist yet. But somewhere along the way, we're told this is good, this is bad, et cetera, and we're programmed, right? But at the end of the day, there's a certain point where, like, what a rite of passage is it's allowing you to realize that you are an individual expression of the collective. And so what are you going to do with your unique set of fingerprints that no one else that's ever walked the planet can do or has ever done? And I think that's one of the best lessons that psychedelics have taught me, is that I think that's what Terence McKenna meant when he said, when you get the message, you can hang up the phone, at least for a little while, right? And you can integrate, right? You can go, okay, cool. I experienced this. Now, how do I experience that? I know for me, through psychedelics, acupuncture has become like almost a terrifying experience for me now. Like, not because of the quills or anything like that most people are nervous about, but there's a point about, the acupuncturist. I go to this really amazing guy. I've been going to him for years. And, he'll put the quills in me. He'll leave for about, I think, around 20, 25 minutes. I've never timed it, but that's how long it feels. At about 20 minutes, there's this thing that will happen where all of a sudden I'm not in my body. Like, I don't know if it doesn't feel like an out of body experience necessarily, but it doesn't feel like I got sucked out of my body. But all of a sudden I just realized, like, whoa, where am I? And I don't even know if I'm really me. I don't know anything in that one moment. And I don't even know, like, when I breathe, it feels like the universe is breathing me. And it will happen. It's every time I've been getting acupuncture, especially since I got initiated into the Brotherhood and Sisterhood of Light through the mystery school. It's been like really a thing where, like, there's like about 30 seconds to about a minute where I'm like out there and my heart starts pounding. Like, when I come back in my body, like, there's a physiological response of something just happened. Right. And I have no idea what that is about, but, I think it speaks to what you were talking about so perfectly, where, we need to start understanding that life is so much more than we make it. And really, it's our belief structures that allow life to either be mundane or exciting. And so, like, psychedelics are not necessary for this, but they can be the best pattern interrupt when you're boxed in today's world of technology and all of these things and keeping up with the Joneses. They can be the pattern interrupt that literally allows you to create the life of your dreams, right? Now, they don't do that just by taking them, but they allow you to get a framework of, like, whoa, okay, now I'm going to shift my priorities, right? That's the quote unquote work that comes after. It's like, okay, what am I going to do now that I have this experience, right? Well, who am I going to be, rather, now that I've had this experience? And I think that's one of the most powerful things. And man, I love riffing with you, man. It's so much fun. I get into the best flows, we have the best time. And I definitely want to have you back on here because I feel we can go so much deeper and, just continue this conversation, and I want to make sure I give you a chance to drop where people can find you, where people can find the podcast, and anything else you feel is pertinent to drop.
Yeah. You can work with me. Go to belovedholistics.com as a patient. I also have a collaborator program for any health coaches out there, any doctors, nurses, midwives, anybody else out there who needs an OBGYN who's open-minded and pretty well-versed in a lot of things. So that's like a monthly program where people pay me a monthly fee and they can consult with me anytime on any of their patients. So both of those things can be found on the website. I've got a podcast, the Holistic OBGYN podcast. That one's growing quickly, and I'm super stoked on some of the conversations I'm having there. You'll be on the show in a couple of weeks here. And what else am I working on? Yeah, I think that's probably it right now. I just feel very grateful for you. And I also want to take a moment to just, to all your listeners, if you're listening to these types of conversations, like, I want to thank you and show you some gratitude, because it's really the everyman. It's the person who's really being open-minded about what we're going through in the world and what the possibilities are for creating a new space and a new, more beautiful world. It's really people like you that I want to hang out with, that I want to be in my circles. And so if you didn't have an open mind, you wouldn't be listening to this. So I want to show some gratitude for people just showing up with an open mind and an open heart as to what it could possibly be going on around us. And very grateful to you, Ryan, again, for having me on, and look forward to collaborating further.
Hell yeah, man. And, the same way I like to end Highly Optimized, I have a very similar question, but a little more geared towards psychedelics. And so my question is this for you, Dr. Nathan Riley. If someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what is the one piece of advice that Dr. Nathan Riley would suggest to allow them to have the smoothest experience possible?
Go down the staircase and open the door.
Yes. I love that, man.
You're going to be okay. You're going to land safely. You just have to trust in the process.
Yes. Trust fall. We've all done it with our friends who usually dropped us. It's like, the difference between these friends is usually they won't drop you.
Medicines are not going to let you down.
Yes. Okay, guys. When I first met Nathan, as I am sure you could recognize in the dialogue we shared today, we clicked immediately. I am fascinated by intelligent people who have managed to keep themselves open-minded and curious with childlike wonder of the world. For me, I believe the biggest mistake most people who enjoy learning make is to close themselves off and fall deeper into what they quote unquote know, which, as you've heard me discuss before, leaves no room for new input in these areas of their lives. Dr. Nathan is a perfect example of what can take place when we connect with psychedelics and plant medicines with intentional reverence and curiosity, and have the faith that whatever experience we receive is the one that our soul signed up for when we consciously chose to connect with them. And for anyone listening who is looking to supercharge their health, learn more about home birth, and take the reins back on their experience of life as a whole, please reach out to Dr. Nathan to embark on that journey today. Life is far too short to experience anything other than perfect harmony in your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies. Dr. Nathan, thank you so much for being a bright light in my life, for doing your part to empower the people of Earth with the knowledge of how to attain true balance in their health, and for the amazing conversations we have that light up my soul. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.
Aho, I love you, brother. Thank you.